All right, I think everyone is in. So greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Carpinteria Birdwatchers online meeting for April 23rd. I see a lot of the regular folks are here. I see Rob Denholtz is here. That's great. Hello, Rob. So today we're going to be talking mainly about Tanagers and Orioles. This was a suggestion from my wife, Linda, who said, you should do something colorful. You should do something, bright and cheerful. And these birds are bringing joy into our lives. You should bring joy into your meeting. So that's the point. So Tanagers and Orioles, because they're super colorful and they're coming through now in their spring migration. So it's very exciting. Some quick housekeeping things. We ask that you keep your mic muted when you're not talking, just to make it calmer. But I will point out, I think you've done too good a job of that in previous meetings. I've asked you all to keep your mics muted, and then I'm talking and I don't hear anything because you've got your mics muted like I asked. So I'm going to encourage you to keep your mics muted, but just not quite so much. Feel free to unmute and heckle me or make commentary or ask questions. If it gets to be too much, I'll ask you to maybe dial it back a little, but I'd be fine with more noise from the attendees. That would be an okay thing. So why don't we practice that? Let's hear a whole bunch of people saying hello at once. Try and unmute and say hello.
Hi.
There we go. That's what I'm looking for.
Hello.
That is exactly what I'm looking for. All right, thank you very much for that. And now please mute yourselves again, unless you're gonna talk. I will point out too, we have the raise hand feature in Zoom. So if you have a comment or a question and you don't want to jump in with your audio, you can use the raise hand feature. And hopefully I will notice that, or one of the co-hosts will notice and bring it to my attention. We also have a text chat in the Zoom meeting where you can put comments, which again, I'll probably be too distracted to notice, but the co-hosts will hopefully notice that and bring it to my attention. So we have the same three co-hosts today as we've had in previous meetings. We've got Tom Beland and Laurel Luby, who is out in her yard on a ladder to bring us a feeder cam. So that's Laurel. Hello, Laurel. And Jenny Slaughter is also here. And also we have a YouTube live stream running as we have in the past. There's a link to it in the group chat, but Zoom is more interactive. So as long as you're willing to have your face on camera, and participate that way, you can participate more interactively. All right, so before I get going, any questions or comments? Has everyone been seeing a lot of great birds in the last week? I see nods, yes. There have been a lot of great birds to see in the last week, and we will talk about that. Let's see, oh, I did want to do a quick bit of follow-up. So in the last, well, it wasn't technically the last meeting, but recently I tried an experiment with a feeder hour where we, so I've seen thumbs up. Is that thumbs up because you're approving or thumbs up because you're raising your hand? If you're raising your hand, go ahead and unmute and tell me that you're raising your hand to speak about something. Yep, just thumbs up, excellent.
I'm just copying Brody.
Oh yeah, excellent. Yeah, thumbs up or approved.
Hands thing.
I'm still kind of weak on where to find all these things. I would look under participants. There's usually a participants area in your Zoom client, in your Zoom app. Should be something about raising your hand.
Yeah, I see it.
Excellent. And I think we're hearing house finches from Laurel out there in the garden at Tom and Laurel's place. So that's great. I'm glad the house finches are participating in the meeting. Oh, so one bit of follow-up. So we did this feeder hour thing where we tried to put a bunch of feeder cams on for an hour and see how many species we could get. And Jim was part of that, and Tom and Laurel were part of that, and I was part of that. And we got 17 species in an hour, which seemed pretty cool. We might do it again if people think that was fun. We could give it a try. I'd like to try and rope in people from outside the area so we can get a better list. We can get some exotic for us feeder birds from other parts of the country. But anyway, just wanted to mention that. Let me know, send an email or something if that's something you want to participate in, and that will increase the odds that we do more of that in the future. I did want to share a few things that I've seen, just people doing a lot of stuff like this, sort of online bird meetings. And I put links for these on the blog post about this meeting at carpwithoutcars.org, and also in the description of the YouTube live stream video. So you can see these links there, but I'm just going to mention them quickly in passing. So National Audubon is doing a spring migration show called I Saw a Bird, and it's basically like this, only probably better produced with fancier guests. But it's live online meetings where they talk about spring migration and talk about birds. And I encourage you to check that out. If you find this compelling, you might well find that compelling. And there's another thing like that that I haven't seen yet, but I'm kind of interested in seeing what it's like. There's an organization called Manomet back east that has a online Zoom meeting they're doing tomorrow with the story of Postel the Wimbrel, and it's a detailed discussion of a particular Wimbrel that was tracked over the course of its migration over the course of a year. So I'm going to check that out, and you're encouraged to go follow the link and check that out as well if that might be something you'd be into. That's tomorrow, I think at noon West Coast time, that that's happening. So the big news locally in terms of birds for the last few weeks has been this big spring migration push. And I don't know how many of you got out there. I know some of you did because I saw your eBird lists, but it was really exciting. And I think it was just the right circumstances at the right time that a lot of these spring migrants were pushing north through the coastal zone here. And there was some, a thick marine layer, some like overcast conditions, which really tends to kind of concentrate the birds. I think a lot of them want to get up and over the Santa Ynez Mountains to continue the northward journey, these little passerine migrants like warblers and vireos and things like that. But if it's all foggy, up a few thousand feet up, they just kind of stop. And so you'll get these big accumulations with lots and lots of warblers and stuff. And it's been very good birding for the last week or so. That reminded me of this eBird list that a lot of people were passing around back in the spring of 2018 up in Quebec. And I don't know if you saw this, but there was just this amazing like fallout event where a huge group of migrants, a huge, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of birds were just flowing through this spot in the course of a day where a bunch of birders were keeping track and doing their best to kind of count them all. And if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to check it out. It's a really interesting eBird list with tons of photos and tons of cool info. And there's a link to that as well. And then I guess, so the last thing before I really get going is I did want to share this Birdcast tool. And this is something that Linus Blomqvist, who was in the Ocean Birds meeting that we did a few weeks ago, he shared this on the SBCO birding email list. And I want to share my screen so I can show you this because it's really pretty cool. Oh, wait a second. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I think I didn't actually start sharing my screen. All right, let me stop that. Okay, and let me try one more time to share my screen. Yeah, because I want to optimize it for the video clip. Okay, one more try. So if I've done this successfully, you should be seeing my screen now. And I want to show you this Birdcast thing, which is really quite cool. So I'm not sure how well you can see this, but basically what this is, it's a map of the United States where they've used weather radar, which can also pick up migrating birds. And they've adapted this to show you the bird migrations over the course of the night, because typically these migrants are moving north at night. And you can pick the date you want to show. So I'm going to go back and show you April 10th. And so if you look at this map, and you look at Southern California where we are, this red line is sunset. So now we're in nighttime. And as you see the shading come in, those are airborne migrating birds showing up on weather radar. So it's not a very active time on April 10th in Southern California. And there's the sunrise line, that yellow line sweeping across. That's sort of your baseline of what a not big migration day looks like. And I'm going to skip to April 15th. when we had those really cool conditions I was talking about. There was a little bit, I think, of a southerly wind, and there was this overcast layer. And so if you look carefully at Southern California, as the sunset line sweeps across, you start to see a lot of migrating birds. And this is that big pulse of migrants that we were getting. So I just thought this was really neat. And I hadn't seen this before. And you can watch it. You can check, what happened last night in terms of migrants and see if it might be a really good day to go out and go bird watching. So I encourage people to check that out. Okay, so with that said, any other questions or comments or last minute stuff before I launch into the Tanagers and Orioles discussion? This is where I start to feel like I need.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Andy.
Do most birds migrate during the nighttime or daytime?
My impression is, I'm not an expert. Some people on this meeting probably are significantly more expert than I am about this, so jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. But my understanding is that for these small passerine birds, these perching birds, yeah, they do, and a lot of other birds, they do actually migrate at night for the most part. Like nighttime is when they get up in the air and really make their big pushes. And then during the day, they'll land and they'll feed, and maybe they'll continue to move along, but it's not the big jumps that they're making during the nighttime flights.
I was wondering, why might there not be as many hummingbirds around my house as earlier?
So when you say not as many now as earlier, how long ago are we talking about for the earlier?
Maybe a week.
Yeah. Well, so again, there was a big migration push about a week ago. And, a lot of the birds that we're seeing over the past week are not birds that are staying here. They're birds that are just moving through. And there's, literally tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of these birds for some species that are coming through. So you see a lot of them. And then they continue. And others are still traveling. It's not like they all go on the same day. There's early migrants, and then there's the big fat part of the migration where there's a lot of them, and then it sort of tapers off. But eventually the migration is over and you just have the resident birds, the ones that are going to hang around here for breeding purposes. So yeah, that's a good question. And definitely, again, if you follow the SBCO birding email list, or you just obsessively read every eBird list submitted in Santa Barbara County every day, which, who would do a thing like that? You can definitely see these big pulses happening and a lot of birds coming through. And for people who position themselves in just the right spot, they get some really amazing lists with, hundreds of warbling, tens of warbling vireos or scores of warbling vireos passing in just a few hours, just, constantly flitting through as they're going up through some of these passes. Eric Culbertson had a post to the mailing list this morning. He was up in Ramiro Canyon this morning at sunrise and saw a big push of migrants moving up and over the mountain. All right, so I'm going to go ahead then and launch into the featured topic of Tanagers and Orioles. And again, I'm going to have to figure out how to do this, and hopefully I will do it correctly. That looks good. All right, so if I've done this right, you should now see a big tanager. So I'm a little bit, I want to apologize a little bit. Usually when I've done these sort of groups of birds, they've been part of, a particular group that is taxonomically related, that are actually fairly closely related, like a family of corvids, jays and crows. In this case, I'm doing tanagers and orioles, and tanagers and orioles are not particularly closely related to each other. They're only related to each other in my brain because they're colorful and they're amazing looking and they're coming through in their spring migration right now. So I chose to talk about them for that reason, but it's not the most rigorously scientific valid grouping that I'm doing. All right, so part one, we'll talk about tanagers. Tanagers are sort of an interesting group. There are hundreds of tanager species in the tropics, in Central and South America. There's only a small number of them that we get up here north of Mexico. And technically, I think the more recent studies based on DNA analysis is that they're actually not that closely related to the birds we call tanagers from the rest of the continent and South America. They're most closely related to cardinals, apparently. So it's all kind of up in the air, and certain groups of birds are being moved around in terms of their connection to each other in evolutionary terms, now that we have more information. But I grew up on 1960s and 70s era field guides where tanagers are just considered tanagers and they're related to these other tanagers, but we won't talk about that. We'll talk about the bird because they're so cool. So here is your eBird histogram for Santa Barbara County. So these are the tanager species that we get over the course of the year, where the thickness of the green box for each week of the year shows you what percentage of eBird lists have at least one of those birds in it. So that you can see that by far the most common one we get is the Western tanager. And it has these big pulses. Like we see it throughout the year. There's a few of these tanagers around throughout the year in the county. But in April and May, we get a big springtime pulse as they move north. And then in the fall, again, we get a big pulse and we're peaking around the third week of September as they head south. So that's the one that we definitely see the most of. The summer tanager is the next most likely to be seen. And this one is more just, we're outside of its regular range. So we're getting vagrants. We're getting, a lot of first-year birds that kind of wander off course, or maybe they wandered off course in previous years and now they just migrate in winter here. So you see them more in the winter months than in the rest of the year. And then there's a couple of other species, hepatic and scarlet tanager, that I'm not really going to talk about. There's only a handful of records ever in Santa Barbara County for those. So if you see one, that's awesome. That would be really amazing and cool. And it could happen. But I'm not going to talk about them because it's unlikely you're going to see one. All right, so we'll start off with this bird. Oh, and what I did not prepare properly is I didn't prepare for my vocalizations, or rather for the bird's vocalizations. But it is just going to take me a second. Okay, so here is a call, or a typical call of this species. Right, so if you did not hear anything there, let me know. I'm going to assume you did hear it and that worked. And here is a song of that species. So it's kind of like a warbling song. It's kind of like an American robin, but more burry, more of a fuzzy sound. So I assume everyone knows what this is already. This is in fact the Western tanager. I'm gonna adjust things at my end a little bit. And this is the breeding male. So this is the kind we're seeing. Most of the males we see now have this very red head, got full breeding plumage. And I just find this an incredible bird to look at. The first of these classes that we ever did, I did a talk on sort of introduction to birdwatching, or birdwatching 101. And I structured it as like who, what, when, where, how, and why. And I finished with this why question, and why go birdwatching? And I just put this photo up in my slide. It was like, for me, this is why I go birdwatching. This is just an amazing aesthetic kind of thing. It's like a great work of art. Why would you not look at a bird like that? So here's a look at sort of a drabber version of the Western tanager. And this is what you might see outside of the breeding season. The males look more like this, where they don't have as much red on their head, and it's variable. And the females, the females have a range. There's fairly drab ones, like this one is a fairly drab one, onto fairly bright ones that have, maybe more green or more yellow. So it's the birds are distracting me in Tom and Laurel's backyard. I'm going to mute Laurel. Sorry about that, Laurel. So the thing I always say, is that plumage lies, but structure tells the truth. So, there's a lot of individual variety over the course of the year, or just from one individual bird to another. So you can't get too hung up on plumage. But if you learn the structure of the bird, that will always tell you the truth. So this tanager beak that the Western tanager female has here, you should really learn that beak. Like if you see that beak, a lot of otherwise kind of confusing birds, sort of greenish, and there's some wing bars, there's not a lot going on. What is it? It's like, oh, but it's got that beak. Ah, it's a Western tanager. So at least for me, that's an important thing to focus on, is that beak. You know, it's longer than a sparrow beak. You know, it's not a really short conical beak, but it's shorter than an Oriole beak. You know, so it's just kind of right in that sort of strange middle ground that tanagers occupy. And like most birds' beaks, you know, it reflects their feeding strategies. So the tanagers we see around here, most of the time, what they're eating is bees, which I think is kind of remarkable. They're up there in the tops of the flowering eucalyptus trees, and they also drink nectar, and they also eat fruit, especially at other times of the year. But in the months when there's a lot of bees around, that's their preferred prey. So you'll see them up there and they're catching bees, and they'll carry bees around and they'll whack their stingers off against a branch and swallow them. And it's kind of fun to watch. I mean, if you're not a big fan of bees, I should be careful. I know Tom is a beekeeper and maybe he finds this all very grim.
He will.
Do you get concerned? Do the tanagers go after your bees in your yard, Tom?
They go after my bees on the trees. I watch them up on the, you know, the bottle brush and the other trees. And you can see them picking up. There's a lot of bees on the trees right now.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to continue. Let's see. So yeah, and here's the label. The non-breeding male on the left and female Western tanager on the right. So here's your eBird sightings records. So again, any of these blue pins is where Western tanager has ever been reported in Santa Barbara County in eBird. The red pins are where it was reported in the last 30 days when I took this screenshot, which was just a couple of days ago. So those red ones are where you're seeing Western tanagers now. And you can see they're distributed throughout the county, but especially in the South Coast where we are is a really good spot for seeing Western tanagers. And especially lately, because they were one of this group of migrants that have made a big push. I think I was at Santa Monica Creek near my home, and I think I reported like 10 or so Western tanagers. Lori actually is in the meeting, right? Lori Daskin, you had a report of just a ton of Western tanagers there, didn't you? Maybe I'm confusing you with someone else.
No,
But
I did with Tom.
Yeah.
Tom was there too. It was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to the point where it's almost kind of hard to count them. It's like, well, there's at least 5 in front of me right now, but if I turn and look over there, there's 5 over there too. So is that 10? And oh, they're moving, and there is some more moving. Like, very hard to get an accurate count. But it's a lot of fun. Oh, and I did want to show one of these cool abundance animations. So hopefully this is going to work. So these are the status and trends graphs that you can see at eBird. They kind of hide it under the science choice in the eBird menu. If you click on science, you can drill your way down to these. But so here is, again, for every week of the year, this is an abundance map of Western tanagers. So you can just see what that migration looks like. And if I pause it at the right time, you kind of step through the last few weeks and you can kind of see. All right, back up a little bit. So here's April 11th. So we're starting to get them in not huge numbers, but in our area here in Santa Barbara County. And then a week later, we're getting a lot more. And then we're getting, by late April, just a ton of them. And this, I think, is based on, what does it say, 2014 to 2018. So this is an average, right? And what we saw last week was sort of a special peak that was even probably way above these numbers. And we still have them. And you can see as we get into, June, like mid-June, there's still a few of them in Santa Barbara County. It's probably pretty small on your screen, but they're really just kind of hanging out, maybe a few of them along the coast and then up in the mountains. Because they're a forest species. They like being up in the conifer forest when they're breeding. So that's where most of them are at this point. They're on their breeding territory. And, so you have to kind of work to find them in Santa Barbara County at that point. But then, a month later, you get into late July, and you got the post-breeding dispersal and the southward migration starts, and then they're everywhere again. Right. Well, I could just look at these all day, but then we won't get through our discussion. All right, so let's go to the next species. Another just stunningly gorgeous bird. I talk about them as like fine works of art. So one thing is that if you're looking for them, they tend to be up high in the trees, right? They like to be up in the canopies. So, you know, if they're works of art, they're hung up high on the museum walls. You got to be willing to kind of crane your neck and get your binoculars out. This is the summer tanager. And this is the adult male, which I don't think I've seen. Because again, when we see the vagrants around here, they tend to be the young birds or maybe female birds. You know, I've yet to see a full-on adult male. I know they've been around. There've been some reports of them over the years, but I have not seen them. Oh, but you know what I didn't do is I didn't do the vocalizations. All right, we're going to back up. And I'll do the vocalizations. So here's the call. And I say the call. This is a call, you know, a sort of representative call. But like a lot of birds, they make a bunch of different vocalizations. And then here's a representative song of the summer tanager. All right. So here is this is actually a photo I took. This is the version of this bird I'm more used to seeing. This is your female or immature summer tanager. And they will start to get like as they mature, they'll start to get red coming in sort of a weird patchy pattern. Like you'll see them have more or less of that reddish color coming in. But again, I call your attention to this beak. It's really key. And it's, you know, significantly bigger than the Western tanager beak. I mean, it's the same kind of beak, but it's more of a schnoz, if I can be so bold as to call it that. And I'm probably the last person who should be so bold in that area, but it's got a big beak. And oh, and it also lacks the wing bars, right? So the Western tanager, you're always going to see, you know, some amount of wing bars, maybe a lot, maybe less, but they should be there. Whereas the summer tanager, you're not going to see wing bars. So that's a really helpful clue. And so here's your eBird sightings records. Many fewer pins than in the case of the Western tanager, and just a few recent ones. Up in the Santa Barbara area, there's been a few reports of summer tanagers in the last 30 days. And their status and trends animation looks like this. As you can see, they really aren't coming up the West Coast the way those Western tanagers are. They're an Eastern species for the most part. So, you know, a few of them go off in the wrong direction. You know, again, usually with this sort of standard vagrancy pattern we get in North America, there'll be a few of the first year birds that just kind of, their compass is just a little off. You know, they march to the beat of their own drummer and they go off in the wrong direction. And some of them end up in Santa Barbara and they like it, so they stay here. Let's get rid of those windows too. My browser do less work. All right, so now I have a quiz, audience interactivity. Here's a really bad photo that I took of a bird eating some persimmons. Are those persimmons? I think they're persimmons. Those of you who know what a persimmon is, nod. Yes, thank you.
Peach.
Or it could be a peach. I think it actually is a persimmon. This is up at the, it looks like a peach though. And again, it's not a great photo to really tell. But this is up at the grounds of the Museum of Natural History up in Santa Barbara. So who wants to hazard a guess what species we've got here? What are we looking at here?
Western tanager.
You are correct, Brody. It is a Western tanager. You can't see it very well because of the foliage, but it's got that Western tanager beak. It's got those
And
wing
it has
bars.
the wing bar.
Yeah, very good. You are ready to go out and see tanagers for real. Yeah, it's a female Western tanager. All right, this is another bird. They're eating the same persimmons. Brody, what do you think we got here?
I think it's the summer tanager.
You are correct. It is the summer tanager.
And yeah,
this is-
those are persimmons. I just couldn't see the top, so I couldn't really tell.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, again, the beak is just a little bit jumbo sized compared to the Western Tanager beak. It doesn't have, it's a little bit of a pale kind of thing going on there on the lesser coverts. It's not really a wing bar to speak of. Pretty plain wings. And if you look really close, you can see it's got a little bit of the sort of color coming, a little bit of the reddish color in a few spots on it.
So do they travel together?
Well, they were together on this day, I think because they were all eating the persimmons. They were all hanging out in the same tree for the purposes of getting that food resource. But yeah, in terms of looking for vagrants, you're likely to find them with related species, either because they're actually flocking with the closest thing they can find to a flock of their kind, or just because, they're exploiting whatever resources, ducks are going to be in a place where you find ducks. So your vagrant ducks are going to be around a lot of non-vagrant ducks. And similarly, in this case, with these tanagers, if you were looking for this particular summer tanager that was right there on the grounds of the Natural History Museum, at this one tree, you saw a lot of Western tanagers, and you'd sift through them, and eventually it was like, oh, there she is. So I was very excited when I saw this summer tanager. All right, one more quiz. This is a little harder because of the angle. This is at Lake Los Carneros. So who wants to hazard a guess about what we're looking at here?
Western tanager.
It is indeed a Western tanager, yeah. I thought I could trick you because the angle makes her beak look a little big, but no, it's a female Western tanager, which was also, I was there looking for a summer tanager that day, and I saw this bird instead. All right, so I'm going to move on now to Orioles. And I'm going to go kind of fast because as is the way of things when I'm running this and get excited, I go long. So I want to try and get this done by about 4:45. So I'm going to zip through the Orioles a little bit. So Orioles are, again, predominantly a tropical species. They live to the south of us, but a few of them come up north of the Mexican border. And it's amazing because they're gorgeous and a little bit ridiculous too in terms of their behavior. If you've got an Oriole feeder and you watch them, they're like clowns, but brightly colored clowns, which I guess is consistent with clowns.
Is that a Nevada Oriole?
So that one we're going to identify in a minute because that's the one that we have a lot of in the county. So I don't want to.
Okay.
I don't want to. No spoilers, right? I don't want to steal its thunder by revealing too soon. But you can probably figure it out from this. So here's our histogram of frequencies of sightings of the different Oriole species in Santa Barbara County. So up here, probably the most common one, the thickest line in those eBird reports is the hooded Oriole. And it's, very much like March to the end of September is when you see, substantial numbers of them. A few of them are around the rest of the year, but, that's mostly the Santa Barbara Christmas count. They go out and they find every Oriole it's possible, every wintering Oriole they can find, and they stake it out for weeks before the count. So that's what that green data is. But for the most part, they're a breeding season species that we don't really see outside of the breeding season. Next most common is the Bullock's Oriole. And again, it's pretty close to showing up as much as the hooded Oriole in the spring migration. Then it tapers off a little bit. They don't really hang out as much. There's a lot of them now, but we're not going to have as many. And then again, they taper off a lot, and except for that little bulge you see in the first week of January and the last week of December, which is, again, mostly the Santa Barbara Christmas count and the Carpinteria Christmas count. We pull our weight the best we can to get any Orioles we can. What else do we have? So next, probably in popularity based on this histogram, is this New World Oriole species. That's a measurement of human laziness. That's a measurement of people like me. You go out there and go, oh, there's an Oriole up there, but I can't be bothered. I don't know what kind it is. It's probably a hooded, maybe it's a Bullock's. It's one or the other. I'm just going to report it as New World Oriole species. And then what do we have? So we have the Orchard Oriole, which is very much doesn't belong here, but it's distinctive enough looking that when one does hang around, it tends to get noticed. And I'm, of course, a huge fan of the one that's been hanging out. This is its third year hanging out over at Santa Monica Creek. Saw it just the other day. As in each of the last 2 years when it's been hanging out there, it started vocalizing a lot in the last few weeks. So if you go there now, you can hear it singing, which is fun. And I'll play an example of that in a minute. And what else do we have? And then Scott's Oriole is also kind of a cool Oriole. It's more of a deserty Oriole. Like it breeds here, just mostly up in the corner of the northeast corner of Santa Barbara County, up in the Piama Valley and off Highway 33. So if you want to make a trip and look for Scott's Orioles, this is a good time to do that. Well, probably not a good time for non-essential travel for other reasons unrelated to birds. But if you're going to make the trip, you could look for a Scott's Oriole right now. There's been a few reports of them lately from up there. What have I left off? Some hybrids, some slashes, and the Baltimore Oriole, right? So fun revelation, or maybe not so fun, just a revelation. This is the species that I have never actually seen in Santa Barbara County. There's been a few of them, I mean, that is around to be seen. There's been a few of them reported, and I've chased them a few times and just never been lucky enough to see one. So that's something that I would be really thrilled to see. Again, with the characteristic Santa Barbara Christmas count, thick bars right during the count window. Like this year, Paul Lehman comes up and he's in San Diego now most times, but he comes up and he birds around the Santa Barbara Christmas count time and says, "Oh, we've got a Baltimore Oriole here, we've got one over here." And like, great, I would love to see that bird. I should look for them harder. All right, let's move on. All right, so this bird that we started off with. Oh, vocalizations, yes. So here is a call. If you have palm trees near your house, you're probably hearing this call lately because they love those palm trees. And here is a song of this species. And as many of you have probably guessed already, this is, why am I not going? It is a hooded oriole. Yeah. This is the adult male hooded oriole. So it's pretty unmistakable. If you can see it well enough to see that head pattern, the male is very hard to mistake for anything else. Big bold wing bar, black, orange, and the extent of the black on the face is I guess the hood is the orange part. I always thought that was weird. It should be like a bibbed oriole because I think the black is what it should be named after. It's named after the orange part. It has a hood of orange.
I have seen one of those around my house, and I kept thinking it was a Nevada Oriole.
Yeah, I'm not sure what a Nevada Oriole is. I'll have to look that up. But yeah, if you see that around here these days, it's almost certainly a hooded Oriole. And there are a number of other Oriole species that I'm not talking about. I'm just going to pretend they don't exist for the purposes of this discussion. Right, here is a female orchard Oriole. Hooded. Oh, excuse me, I said orchard. See, I've got orchard Oriole on the brain. A female hooded Oriole. Thank you. Thank you for chiming in. This is why it's good that you're not all muted because you can correct me when I'm saying silly things. So here's your female hooded Oriole, and if you look close, you can see she's got like a filament of something in her beak, and I'm going to assume that is nest-making behavior because this is what the hooded Oriole nest looks like. They weave these nests together, these elaborate nests. And in this one, you can actually see the head of an Oriole inside there if you look close. So I like to put these in those palm trees, and they take the fronds apart. They have these long strands, and they weave these nests. Here's your eBird distribution. There are a ton of them, mostly south of the San Ynez Mountains. I mean, they become, much less abundant north of the San Ynez Mountains, which is one of the cool things about bird watching in Santa Barbara County. We have that dividing line where we're sort of the northern limit of a lot of birds, abundant range, and we're the southern limit of some other northerly species range. So right around where we are is where they come together. Do we want to see the animation of its migration?
Yes.
All right. We want to look at that. You see it's wintering down in Mexico. And it pushes up into the southwest, a lot in the the Southern California coastal plain. Not really much more. Like around here, it's not a super unusual bird. Like we get them. I guess southern Arizona and New Mexico, they've got some too. Southern Texas. But for the rest of the country, this is quite an exotic bird. This would be like, oh wow, hooded oriole. Local specialty of ours. Okay, let's move on to this bird. And let's play its call. Let's try to play this call again. Here we go. And I've gone on to play the Western Tanager, so pay no attention to that Tanager at the end. Although, in the field, when you're hearing these things call, there's a lot of other things calling at the same time. So that was an accident, but reflected actual circumstances that you might encounter. And here's its song. So if you're out around, big sycamore trees or big eucalyptus trees up in the canopy, you'll hear a lot of that lately, because there's a lot of these moving through. This is again one of those migrant species that showed up just a ton recently. And by the way, just as an aside, I see someone in the waiting room, and I'm going to go ahead and admit her, Tom.
All right.
She looks like an acceptable person. Anyway, so yeah, this is Bullock's Oriole. And that is your adult male. One of the field guides, I think it's Pete Dunn's field guide companion, he talks about this bird as being a beatnik because it has a beanie, like a dark beanie and dark wraparound shades and a goatee, which I thought was kind of clever. I've never thought of that before, but does help me remember. But if you see this characteristic face pattern of the adult male, that's a good feature to look for. And this big white wing panel. So it's got, its wing bars between the coverts here actually join up and make a big white area. It's like an extra thick wing bar in a way. So that's a good thing to look for to characterize the male Bullock's Oriole. And then here is the female. And these birds can be pretty similar looking to the female hooded Oriole, but some things to look for, this dark eye line, which the immature male Bullock's Orioles will also kind of have versions of this, where we'll get more or less black going on around the face. But this dark eye line starting to come in is a help. And then this interesting pattern where the belly is pretty pale and there's more color on the breast and in the vent area than in between. That's a good sign that you're looking at a Bullock's Oriole female or an immature male. Oh, and I thought this was cool. So this is a Bullock's Oriole over on Santa Monica Creek at that big sycamore at the end of El Caro Lane. But it's exhibiting this behavior called gaping that all Orioles, and in fact all icterids. So Orioles are part of a larger family that includes blackbirds and meadowlarks and grackles and birds like that. And they all have this behavior of gaping where their beak is structured and the muscle attachments to their skull is such that they can pry their beaks open with a fair amount of force compared to the typical bird. Most birds, they can push down real hard with their beaks, but they can't pry things open with their beaks so much. But Orioles can, and they do it a lot. Like you'll see them, or like meadowlarks in the grass, they'll put their beak down in the grass and they'll gape open to like expose whatever's in there and then grab it to eat it. And that's what this male Bullock's Oriole is doing with these sycamore leaves. It's gaping. Here's your eBird distribution. So pretty broadly distributed in the county. And we'll look at their abundance map. The animation. So sort of similar to the hooded Oriole, but much more widespread, right? It covers most of the western continental US. The Bullock's Oriole does. All right, my favorite. What can I say? Let's do so this is see, this is a call of this species. And this is a recording of its song. And I actually made this recording recently on Santa Monica Creek. So this is not only this bird, but it is actually this bird, this bird you see on your screen. So a fair amount of traffic noise there as well, but hopefully you could hear the sound of the male orchard oriole singing. And let's see, so pretty much the only places in Santa Barbara County it's been seen is on the South Coast. The only place one's been seen recently is that one on Santa Monica Creek. And here is its abundance animation. Or what should be its abundance animation. I'll try reloading. Let's give it a try again. Yeah, so again, this bird has no business being here, but 3 years ago or whenever it was, it took off in the wrong direction and it decided that Carpinteria was a great place to spend the winter. So he comes here and spends the winter. Usually by the first week of May, he's gone. So presumably he's heading off to his normal breeding range and doing his normal breeding activity, and then comes back here. So with any luck, he'll be back again next fall.
What's the gray blob in the middle of Mexico?
This gray blob here?
Yeah.
That's their no prediction. And if you click, I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to bother, but if you click through, it'll give you details about why they felt they could not make a prediction in that area. Probably there's too few eBird lists in that area, so their model, they weren't comfortable extrapolating abundance there. But yeah, that is kind of interesting, and I wondered that too the first time I saw that.
It moves.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Oh, and this species. So again, I was talking about this.
This must be Brody's Nevada bird.
They do have these in Nevada, so there you go. Yeah. Here is a call. With some extra species in the background for you birding by ear types to identify. All right, and here is its song.
They sound a little like black-headed grosbeaks.
Yeah, they do. There's a lot of that sort of that warbly kind of, that sort of sweet toned musical warbling. So this is the Scots Oriole. This is the adult male. This is more what the female looks like in the immature. So sort of, for an Oriole, they have a pretty big beak. So if you're really focused in on that structure question, this is a big honking beak, and the male's the same way. It's got a pretty large pointy beak for an Oriole. And then again, really, if you want to see them in Santa Barbara with any kind of reliability, you're going to go up to the northeastern corner of the county here, Ventacopa and Cuyama. There is this one that's been seen recently. There's a place called Aloes in Wonderland, and it's like a private cactus garden that this person has up in above Santa Barbara. And he's had one hanging out there that he invited people to come see. And I was tempted to go see, and I didn't. And now I've got to probably go to Cuyama if I want to see them. And we'll look at where it goes. Now I'm kind of going a little long here. Folks, it's fine if you want to just bail and go about your business. I won't feel bad, but I'll keep going and try and get through this as quickly as I can. So here you can see the Scots Oriole is really a Southwest desert species. Yeah, and those just the edge of their breeding range kind of gets up in the northeast corner of Santa Barbara County there. This would help if I let you see the dates. All right, and this I think is the last species I'm going to talk about. And it sounds like this. And its song. So you can probably tell from that Bob White in the background that this is not a recording made locally. This is a Baltimore Oriole, and the males have this big black hood. So they're about the size of the Bullock's Oriole and sort of shape-wise pretty similar to the Bullock's Oriole. But as we'll see when we look at the distribution in a minute, it's sort of the east of the Mississippi version of the Bullock's Oriole out in the west. This is the adult male, that big black head. It's pretty distinctive. I mean, it's kind of similar to the Scots Oriole in a way, but it's orange, not yellow like the Scots Oriole. And here's where Bullock's has tended to show up, Baltimore. Here's where Baltimore has tended to show up when it does show up. It's on the South Coast for the most part, but relatively few occurrences and none in the last 30 days, no red pins. I think I'm clicking too soon. Like I'm clicking before it's loaded all the JavaScript. Let me try reloading. Give it another try. All right, that's right. Maybe this one. Really doesn't want to show me this. I step through it. I apologize for the dead air. This is not good programming. All right, I'm going to try force reloading this page. Give it one more try. You really want to see the Baltimore Orioles animation. This could be my browser is just not happy. Well, anyway, if you could see this, what you would see is something very similar to what we saw where the Bullock's Oriole pushed up into the western part of the country, except in this case, the Baltimore Oriole pushes up into the eastern part of the country and then back down to Mexico. All right, so here's a quiz again, and I'm going to tell you in advance, this quiz is not going to have a very satisfying resolution. So this is a bird over by Santa Monica Creek that was climbing around in that same sycamore, and I was very excited because, boy, this looks to me like it might be an immature Baltimore Oriole, like a first-year male Baltimore Oriole. It's got a lot of dark on the head, it's got kind of the right structure, and so I circulated this on the SBCO birding list, and some very high-ranking experts were kind enough to kind of weigh in and give their opinions. And their opinion is that, yeah, it might be a first-year male Baltimore Oriole, but it also might be a hybrid. There's a fair number of these Baltimore Bullock's hybrids that we get. So if a bird's kind of ambiguous, it doesn't look like a full-on pure Baltimore Oriole, you're going to have a hard time selling it to the skeptical crowd that is in fact a Baltimore Oriole and not a hybrid, which is the way it goes. I mean, it's still a cool bird, just not necessarily one that can be ticked in the list. And by the same token, this is a bird that's been around the last few weeks near where I live. Eric Culbertson took this photo a few weeks ago, about a block away from where I live, where he is staying with his parents. And it's kind of got the similar thing going on. Here's some really poor photos I got of what I'm pretty sure is the same bird last week along Santa Monica Creek. It's got a dark head. It's got the right kind of structure. Really hard to say what this is, though. Eric inquired for expert opinions, and the opinion was, yeah, probably some kind of hybrid, or maybe it's a, a little more Bullocks, a little more Baltimore, somewhere in the vicinity of either of them. So that's what we got. Okay, I'm going to go ahead though, and that is the last of my slides. So I'm going to stop that and go back to seeing all of your faces, which is fun. Checking for questions. I see there is a question from Brody that he sent to me. Next week, can we do coraciforms? Maybe. I don't know what those are. What are coraciforms, Brody?
They're the hornbills, bee eaters, toadies, and the kingfishers.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, we can totally do that. We're going to have relatively few local species, and I've usually been, pretty locally focused. So we may have a fairly short list, but I will do some research on coraciforms, and next week we will have some coraciform content. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to stretch it out to a whole meeting, but we will get them in there, and I will look forward to learning about them. So thanks for that.
One of them that we have around here is the belted kingfisher.
I was expecting that was the one that I was going to be able to show you. So that's good. And that's a cool bird, and we've never talked about it. And it's a really interesting bird. So yeah, that'll be fun. Other questions, feedback, input?
What are some food that we would put out to attract?
Yes. Yes, and in fact, I totally forgot to talk to you about this. My sister cannot be here, but she's going to watch the archived YouTube live stream later, and she's setting up an Oriole feeder, and she specifically wanted to know about what can I do to feed Orioles, or how can I, attract them. And I said, oh, I got the people for you to talk to. Tom Beland has all kinds of Oriole feeding going on in his backyard. So Tom, please tell us, how do you attract Orioles to your backyard?
One is the exact same sugar water that the hummingbirds drink, except that you have to make sure the hole that the Oriole goes in is larger. So you have to get a type of feeder that there's not a hole than the hummingbirds. And the second thing that they Orioles love is grape jelly. Just plain old grape jelly. I usually put big drops of it. Last year, Smart Final gave me a case. And I went through a case of grape jelly.
So I am curious, how do you keep the ants out of your Oriole feeders? Because I've had the issue where, I put the hummingbird feeder up there, and the hooded Orioles can come to the hummingbird feeder, even with the smaller holes. But the ants get in it, and then nobody's happy, except the ants. I'm sure they think it's just great.
And I have an ant that took this little cup full of water. And so it's full of water. I hook it up, and then I hook the feeder underneath it.
Excellent. Yeah, I should do that.
Yeah, the ants go in here.
And that cup and hook arrangement, that's like, I can just Amazon that, or order that from Wild Birds Unlimited or someplace like that?
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent.
Bottle brush bushes.
Bottle brush bushes. All these birds really like that. And the tanagers like it because there's so many bees, right?
In New Zealand, flax.
Flax?
I've seen them go to New Zealand flax when it flowers.
Oh, gotcha. That's an exotic planting that these birds really like. Yeah, I was reading, a lot of these species have expanded their range into Southern California, or stick around in Southern California longer than they might otherwise have done. And this is true of some of the hummingbirds we talked about at a previous meeting, because of the exotic plantings, because people are really into these cool flowering plants, like the Cape honeysuckle, right, which is where that orchard oriole comes every winter to hang out in the Cape honeysuckle hedge along Santa Monica Creek. All right. Any other questions, comments?
Can I just mention?
Okay, let's do Rob first, and then Andrea.
Thanks. You mentioned Wild Birds Unlimited. I just wanted to mention Frank DiMartino is offering free delivery of birdseed if you want to order. He'll just bring it to your house. You don't have to go get it. You don't even have to talk to them.
So Frank DiMartino, I recognize that name from the Christmas count organizing, right? He's
Yeah,
involved in
Frank,
some.
Frank is one of the expert birders of Ventura County. He opened Wild Birds Unlimited
Gotcha.
in Ventura.
All right. Well, that's good to know. I will probably be taking advantage of that. Andrea, you had a comment also.
Where is it on Santa Barbara or on Santa Monica Creek that you saw those birds?
So yeah, if you go to the west end of El Carro Lane, it's a cul-de-sac and it stops right there. And you park there and you continue walking west, you come to a bike path, a paved bike path that runs parallel to the channelized creek, and it runs north and south. The paved part of the bike path runs south to Villa Real. And that's the section that has this big Cape honeysuckle hedge with the orange flowers on the far side of the channelized creek. And then on the side where the bike path is, there's some big bottle brush and there's some big eucalyptuses that are flowering right now. It's a great spot for tanagers and orioles and hummingbirds. I wish I was there right now. On a hot day like this, probably the nectar is really pumping out and it's just full of birds. No, I'm very happy to be here. But if I weren't here, that's probably where I would be, because it's like, 150 yards from my house, so I can go there all the time.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up then, but thank you everybody for participating. We'll probably do it next week at the same time, so Thursday at 4 o'clock, and there will be choraciforms discussed along with maybe some other things. I'll think about it and throw it together. I appreciate you guys continuing to turn out even when I'm kind of throwing these things together quickly and they're maybe not as organized as they might be. But what are we going to do? It's our chance to get together and talk with each other and interact in a way that we used to do at the library, and now we can do it this way. And hopefully we'll be back in the library at some point in the not too distant future. Okay, well, yeah, thank you everybody. And
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you,
Thanks
John.
so much.
yeah, you're very welcome, and I enjoy it a lot. It's my favorite thing to do all week. I look forward to it. So.
Sounds like
Okay, goodbye everyone. I'm shutting down the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
hey, hi Tom.
Bye.
Bye.